Welcome back to Revenge Heat. What I'm about to tell you happened in a suburb outside of Nashville, Tennessee. My name is Avery Cole. I'm 32, a licensed physical therapist, and the kind of woman who splits her grocery receipts into categories in a notes app because I like knowing exactly where I stand. I've always been that way. Not stingy, just aware. So when my cousin texted me one Tuesday afternoon and said she'd used my card just for gas, like 20 bucks, I didn't panic. I told myself I'd check it later and went back to my patient notes. Later turned into 11:47 at night when I finally sat down with a glass of water and opened my banking app out of habit. The gas charge was there. $22. Fine. But underneath it was a charge for $340 at a nail salon. Then $180.99 at a boutique I'd never heard of. Then a furniture store for $620. Then a meal delivery app twice in the same day for a combined $94. I kept scrolling and my water glass just sat there going warm in my hand. In 11 days, $5,900 had left my account and charges I did not make. Money I'd been setting aside for a medical procedure I'd been putting off for 2 years, and a security deposit on an apartment I'd been planning to move into in the spring. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I sat very still on my couch in the dark and felt something inside me go completely quiet, the way a room goes quiet right before a very bad storm. My cousin had been staying with me for 6 weeks by then. 6 weeks that were supposed to be 2. I need to back up and explain how we got here, because the $5,900 didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because I said yes when I should have thought longer, and then I kept saying yes every time after that without anyone ever asking. Her name is Lacey. She's 27, my mom's sister's daughter, and we'd been close growing up in the way that cousins are close, when the family gatherings are frequent and the grandparents are still alive to hold everything together. After my grandmother passed, we drifted the way people do. Different cities, different lives. I hadn't seen her in almost 3 years when she called me in October, crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. She and her boyfriend had broken up, except they'd been living together, and when he ended it, he gave her 2 weeks to find somewhere else to go. She had a part-time retail job that barely covered her car payment. She had debt she didn't like to talk about in detail. She had nowhere to go that felt safe. And she had my number because we were family and family meant something, at least to me. I have a 2-bedroom apartment in a nice enough part of Nashville. The second room had been my home office, a reading corner and a desk where I did my continuing education coursework at night. I told myself it was just temporary. I cleared out the closet, moved my desk into the corner of my bedroom, bought a real bed frame off Facebook Marketplace so she'd have something decent to sleep on, and I told her to take as long as she needed to get stable. The first couple weeks were actually okay. She cooked dinner twice. She offered to clean the bathroom. She talked about her job search like it was something she was actively doing. There was an energy of momentum to it, like she was genuinely embarrassed about her situation and trying to work her way out of it. But somewhere around week 3, the momentum quietly died. The job listings she'd bookmarked on my laptop stopped getting visited. The shifts she picked up at work got shorter because she was exhausted from everything. The cooking stopped. The cleaning stopped. She started sleeping until noon and staying up until 3 in the morning watching things on the TV in the living room while I was trying to sleep before a 7 a.m. shift. When I mentioned it gently, she teared up and said she'd been really struggling mentally and she needed me to understand that she was doing her best. I said I understood. I told her to take her time. I work 40 hours a week plus documentation time. I come home tired in the way that physical work makes you tired, where your feet hurt and your lower back talks back, and all you want is quiet and something hot to eat. Instead, I came home to dishes in the sink and delivery boxes stacked by the trash and the apartment smelling like whatever she'd ordered while I was treating patients. I started grabbing takeout on my way home, just so I didn't have to deal with the kitchen. I started going to bed earlier just to have a room to myself. The grocery bill was going up even though I was eating out more, which meant she was eating in on my dime, consistently. My electric bill jumped because someone was always home running everything. I noticed a streaming subscription I didn't recognize on my credit card statement and figured I must have accidentally started a trial somewhere. I didn't dig into it. I was tired and I had other things to think about. That's the thing about being someone who handles things. You develop this reflexive habit of smoothing everything over before it becomes a real problem. You tell yourself it's manageable because managing things is what you do. You tell yourself it's temporary because letting yourself believe otherwise is too exhausting to sit with. Except it wasn't temporary, and I wasn't managing. I was just paying. Back to that Tuesday evening and the gas charge that wasn't just a gas charge. I sat with my phone for a long time going through every line. The nail salon charge had an address 2 miles from my apartment, the day she'd told me she had a job interview downtown. The boutique charge had a timestamp from a Thursday afternoon when I'd been at work. The furniture store I had to look up, and when I did I realized it was a decorative item, not something practical, just something pretty, charged to a card that lived in my wallet in my purse in my bedroom. I went to my purse. The card was still there. She hadn't taken it physically. She had the number, I realized, because 3 weeks earlier I'd asked her to order something online for me when my hands were occupied and I'd read the numbers out to her and never thought about it again. I put the card down on my nightstand and looked at the ceiling for a long time. In the morning, before I went to work, I knocked on her door. She opened it squinting, hair messy, the room dark behind her because she had the blackout curtains I'd bought for her pulled shut at 9 in the morning. I told her I needed to look at something with her. I held up my phone with the bank statement pulled up. I kept my voice neutral. I said her name, I said I could see charges here I didn't make, and I needed her to tell me what these were. She looked at the screen. Something moved across her face, just briefly, a flicker of recognition before she arranged her expression into confusion. She said, slow and careful, that she'd used the card once, just for gas. She told me about it. She thought I knew. I scrolled to the nail salon. She bit her lip. She said she'd meant to ask me, but she'd been going through so much and her nails had been really making her feel bad about herself, and she'd figured she'd pay me back as soon as she got her next paycheck. I scrolled to the boutique. The furniture store. The delivery charges. She stopped talking. I asked her, as calmly as I could, whether she understood that these charges together came to almost $6,000, and she looked at me, and I watched something shift in her, some decision get made. She crossed her arms and said, quietly but with a certainty that stunned me, that she was going through the hardest time of her life, and she couldn't believe I was standing there treating her like a criminal when she was family. She said she thought I wanted to help her. She said she'd been struggling with her mental health, and I was making it so much worse right now, and maybe I needed to think about the kind of person I was being. I stood in her doorway for a moment, then I said I needed to get to work and we'd talk when I got home. She said okay. She closed the door. I drove to work. I saw 5 patients. I did my documentation. I ate a sandwich at my desk, and I thought about the look on her face when she crossed her arms and made herself the victim of that conversation. I thought about $6,000. I thought about the procedure I'd been putting off because it wasn't urgent, but it was painful, and it was getting worse, and I'd been saving carefully for months to cover the out-of-pocket cost. I thought about the deposit on the apartment I'd walked through twice and loved, the one with the good light and the quiet street and the extra closet, the one I'd been picturing myself in. I thought about my grandmother, who I think Lacey was banking on me thinking about, the one who used to say family helps family. Who did mean it, but who also, I think, meant it as something mutual, not as a mechanism for one person to keep taking from another indefinitely. I drove home and she was on the couch. The TV was on. There was a delivery bag on the coffee table that had not been there this morning. She looked up when I came in and immediately said she'd been thinking about our conversation and she wanted to talk. I told her I'd been thinking too. I set my bag down, went to my room, and changed my clothes. Then I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I started with my bank. I filed disputes on every charge I hadn't authorized and attached the card use history I'd already screenshotted. I called the card company and explained that my card number had been used without my permission by someone staying in my home. They flagged the account, canceled the card, and told me to expect a new one in 3 to 5 business days. Then I went through everything else. I removed the card number from every saved profile on every device in the apartment. I checked the streaming accounts and found 2 subscriptions she'd started in my name, both still in the free trial window, both set to charge the following week. I canceled them. I changed the password on the account she'd been using to order delivery, the one that had my card saved as the default. I worked quietly for about an hour. She knocked on my door twice. I said I was busy. By the time I'd finished, my hands were steady in a way they hadn't been all day. I went to the living room and sat in the chair across from her. I want to be fair about what happened next, because she did cry. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere genuine, not performance. But I've worked in healthcare long enough to know that someone can be genuinely upset and also genuinely wrong. Both things can be true at the same time. She said she didn't realize how much it had added up to. She said she told herself she'd pay it back before I noticed. She said her mental health had been so bad and she'd been trying to treat herself because nothing else was working, and she knew it wasn't the right thing to do, but she'd been in survival mode and couldn't I see that she was drowning. I let her say all of it. Then I said, I hear you. I know this year has been hard. The $15,900 is not a cry for help. It's not a survival purchase. A nail appointment and boutique clothes and a decorative item from a furniture store. Those aren't things you buy when you're drowning. Those are things you buy when you think someone else is going to keep you afloat no matter what you do. She flinched. I said, I'm not going to report it to the police tonight, but I am going to pursue every chargeback the bank will give me. And I need you to understand that my accounts are now locked to you completely. My cards, my apps, my logins. You don't have access to any of it. She asked if I was kicking her out. I said, not tonight. I told her I needed to see something different. I needed to see her actually working toward leaving. Not talking about it, not planning it in theory, actually doing it. I told her I was going to give her 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, I expected to see real job applications, real shifts picked up, a real plan for where she was going next. I told her I'd help her look. I'd sit with her and go through listings. I'd proofread her resume, but I was not going to keep carrying her financially while she bought herself things I couldn't afford for myself right now. She nodded. She said she understood. She said she was sorry. I went to bed and didn't sleep well. The next day, I printed a list of job openings: retail management, which she'd done before, receptionist roles, coffee shops hiring full-time, delivery positions she could work around her existing part-time job. I left the stack on the kitchen counter with a sticky note that said I can help with applications tonight if you want. I came home and the stack was exactly where I'd left it. She was watching a show. She said she'd looked at them and most weren't really right for her experience level, or they were too far. I sat across from her and asked which one she'd actually applied to. She looked at the stack. She said she'd been going to, but she'd had a rough mental health day and she didn't want to apply to things when she wasn't in the right headspace because she might not present herself well. I said, okay. Tomorrow then. Tomorrow came. And the day after that, the stack moved once to make room for a delivery bag and then moved back. On the 5th day, I took a half day from work. I went to 3 of the places on the list in person, which you can still do for certain positions, and I asked whether they were hiring and what the process was. 2 of them said walk-in applications were welcome. 1 gave me a name to ask for. I wrote it all on a note card and left it on her pillow with the sticky note, they're expecting walk-ins. Ask for Jamie at the 3rd one. When I got home that evening, she was sitting on the couch looking at her phone. She glanced up and said she hadn't made it out today. Something about her car making a noise and she didn't want to drive it somewhere unfamiliar in case it broke down. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I went to make dinner. I want to be honest about something. There was a part of me, during those 5 days, that kept hoping she'd surprise me. I kept leaving space for her to be the person she was when she first got here, the one who cooked dinner and offered to help and seemed embarrassed by needing to ask for anything. I wanted to be wrong about what I was starting to see clearly. Because if I was right, It meant I had let this go on much longer than I should have, and I had let it happen out of loyalty to a version of our relationship that apparently only existed in my memory. On day 8, I came home to find she'd had a friend over. I didn't know the friend. They were eating delivery food in the living room and watching something loud. My living room. My delivery platform, I checked later, sure enough. My address, my saved card that I thought I'd removed, except I'd missed a secondary payment method I hadn't known existed on that profile. I said hello to the friend. I went to my room. I removed the payment method. I sat on the edge of my bed and I did the thing I'd been avoiding doing for 3 weeks. I got really honest with myself. She wasn't going to change. Not in 3 weeks. Not in 3 months. Not because she couldn't, but because she didn't have to. Not as long as I kept the door open and the utilities paid and the delivery platforms loaded with a backup card she could find a way to access. I had created a situation where there was no incentive to do anything differently, and then I had been genuinely surprised when nothing changed. I thought about my grandmother again. I thought about what she actually meant when she said family helps family. I think she meant it as something you do when someone needs a hand up, not as a permanent structure you build for someone who stopped reaching for anything a long time ago. I wrote a letter, not a text, a letter, because I wanted to be clear and I didn't want it to turn into an argument in real time. I printed it and left it on the kitchen table before I went to bed. The letter said, I love you and I have tried to help you. I have now given you 3 weeks, and during that time, there have been no job applications, no shifts added, no concrete plan, and one additional unauthorized charge on a payment account I thought I had closed to you. I am not able to continue supporting this. You have 2 weeks to find another place to stay. I will help you look if you want that help. I will give you a reference for a rental application. I will not extend this deadline. I am asking you to take this seriously. She came out the next morning and found it before I was awake. I heard her in the hallway and then I heard quiet. She knocked on my door. I said, come in. She was holding the letter and she looked different from the night before, less certain. She asked if I was serious. I said yes. She sat down on the edge of the chair in the corner and was quiet for a while. Then she said she didn't know where she was going to go. She said she didn't have money for a deposit. She said this wasn't fair. I said, I know it feels that way, but I paid the deposit on this apartment with money I saved while also handling everything here. You've had 6 weeks and the runway to put something together, and instead I have a bank dispute open for nearly $6,000 that came out of the money I was saving for my own future. So I understand this is hard, but I need you to understand that it has also been hard for me, quietly the whole time. She didn't say anything. I said, there are rooms for rent that don't require a full deposit. There are transitional housing resources in the city. If you're genuinely struggling with your mental health, there are also free and sliding scale options I can help you find. I'm not walking away from you. I'm just not doing this anymore. The 2 weeks that followed were uncomfortable, the way only living with someone who's angry at you can be. She was mostly cold. She made pointed comments about how some people didn't know what real struggle looked like. She told me once, quietly, that she told her mom about what I was doing and her mom thought I was being cruel. I didn't respond to any of it. I kept the Wi-Fi password the same. I kept food in the fridge. I helped her look at rooms for rent online twice, and both times she found reasons why each one wasn't workable. I found one she couldn't find fault with: a furnished room in a house with 2 other women, 30 minutes from her part-time job. First month free with a background check. I sat with her and helped her fill out the application. She got it. On the last day, she packed her things into her car in 3 trips. There wasn't a lot because most of what filled that room was what I'd bought or provided. She left without saying goodbye, which I had expected. Her mom sent me a text that said, I hope you're happy with yourself. I put my phone down and went to make coffee. Outside, a Saturday morning in March, quiet street, good light coming through the kitchen window. I called the bank. The disputes had been finalized. I had recovered just over $4,000 through chargebacks. Not everything, but the majority. The remaining amount I wrote off in my head as the cost of a lesson I was never going to need to learn twice. I scheduled the procedure for the following month. I reopened the conversation with the apartment I'd loved, and it was still available. And I put down the deposit on a Thursday afternoon while sitting in my car in the parking lot of the clinic where I work, crying a little bit from relief and a little bit from everything it had taken to get there. Lacey and I haven't spoken since. Her mom unfollowed me on everything, which I figured would happen. A mutual family member told me at Easter that Lacey was doing okay, that she had picked up more shifts and seemed to be getting herself together. I was glad to hear it. I meant that genuinely, not sarcastically, not with any bitterness attached. I hope she figures it out. I just stopped being willing to be the reason she didn't have to. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain, and I know Lacey and her mom have probably told that version more than once. In it, I'm a cold person who threw my cousin out when she was at her lowest. I gave up on family because of money. I value dollars over people. But here's what I know. I sacrificed my home office. I bought a bed frame for someone else to sleep on. I picked up extra weekend shifts so I could keep covering the bills that grew every month with another adult in the apartment. I put off my own health care. I pushed back a move I had been excited about for a year. I did all of that willingly because I thought I was helping someone get back on their feet. The moment I understood that I wasn't helping her stand up, I was just making it easier for her to keep sitting down, everything changed. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. And sometimes, with the people who matter to you, those two things are going to look the same from the outside for a long time before the difference becomes obvious. If you've ever been in a situation where helping someone you love started to feel like disappearing yourself, this is your reminder that you're allowed to draw a line. That loving someone doesn't mean funding a life they have no intention of building. That protecting your own future isn't selfish. It's how you stay standing long enough to actually be there for the people who need you. And sometimes the truest, most honest thing you can do for someone who's been leaning on you too long is to step back, calmly, and let them find out what they're actually capable of. I've thought about this a lot since everything settled. Not obsessively, just the way you return to something when you're washing dishes or sitting in traffic and your mind goes quiet enough to actually examine it. What happened with my cousin wasn't a single bad decision on her part. It was a series of small ones, each one made a little easier because the one before it went unchallenged. She used my card once for gas and told me, I let it go. That told her something. She used it again without asking. I didn't notice right away. That told her something else. By the time $5,900 had moved out of my account and into her idea of a normal week, the pattern had already been running for a long time. I had built the tracks. I just didn't realize I was also the one funding the train. That's the part that sat with me the hardest. Not what she did, but what I allowed. I am a person who manages things carefully. I track my spending. I plan ahead. I set goals and I work toward them with real patience. And yet, inside my own apartment, I stopped applying any of that discipline to what was happening right in front of me. Because it was family, and family felt like a category where the normal rules were supposed to be suspended. But here's what I understand now. The rules don't suspend, they just go underground. And when you ignore them long enough, they resurface as a $5,900 bank statement at midnight and a cousin who crosses her arms and tells you you're making her mental health worse for asking about it. Lacey is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that, because easy villain stories are comforting, but they're not usually true. She made choices that caused real damage, and she let those choices build up instead of stopping them, and when she got caught, she defaulted to deflection. Those things are all true, but she was also a 27-year-old who had been handed a soft landing with no conditions attached, and no one asking anything of her, and she responded the way a lot of people respond when consequences disappear. She stopped preparing for them. That's not a character judgment. It's just what happens when you remove friction from someone's life entirely. Growth requires some resistance. You can't build anything real on a surface with no traction. What I learned about myself through this is harder to sit with. I had confused generosity with avoidance. I kept the peace because confrontation felt like cruelty. I absorbed the cost of other people's comfort because it was easier than having the conversation that might make things uncomfortable for an evening. And I called all of that kindness. But it wasn't, not really. It was fear wearing a very charitable outfit. The morning I put that letter on the kitchen table, I was scared. I genuinely did not know what would happen. I did not know if she would leave or scream or go back to her mom and tell a version of events that made me the cold one. All of those things happened, in fact, in some form. And I survived all of them. That's the part no one tells you about drawing a line. The anticipation of it is almost always worse than the reality. I got most of my money back. I got my apartment back. I got my procedures scheduled and my deposit paid, and a Saturday morning in March that was just mine. Quiet, the light coming through the kitchen window the way I'd always wanted it to. Lacey, from what I hear, is doing better. Working more. Standing more steadily on her own. Maybe the most honest thing I ever did for her was stop making it so easy not to. You already know what you need to do. You've known for a while. The question is just whether you're ready to stop calling the delay kindness.